Scott Eggleston is back with us for the second week in a row.
No,
that's a streak,
this is the third.
Is it the third?
It's the third week in a row.
because we did Under the Skin. Or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That
And then-
Scarlett Johansson driving around in a van movie.
which is not bad. It's not
So
great,
the
but it's not
third
bad.
straight week. So we might
Yeah.
have to retitle the show.
No,
But
don't do that. No.
I know we're not going to. But the reason Scott's back today is we talked about The Mutations last week, a brilliant film.
No.
But it has a
No,
lot
it's
of
not.
a lot of analogies to the movie we're talking about today, the
Just
1932
cue you to lift
Tod
up.
Browning
Yeah.
movie Freaks. I would almost say the career ending for Tod Browning movie. But let's get right in. Gene, where are you at with Freaks?
Freaks. First of all, it's short. It's only 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And while I was watching this thing, I do have to confess, I fell asleep.
Oh, no.
And then, but I was watching it last night. This is Saturday morning. And I was watching it. It was like 1:00 in the morning. And I just fell asleep. But as I was watching the first half before I fell asleep, I was thinking of the book, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. You guys know, are you familiar with this?
Uh-huh.
I'm not.
Yeah. But a common I love that book anyway, but it's great. But a criticism of that book is that nothing really happens in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And I was watching this movie and I'm thinking, what is going on? There's this we're at a carnival show in the early 30s, probably height of the Depression. People have to work. And so they're doing what they can to get, food in their tummies. And so what the show is just about people just talking to each other. And it reminded me in a way of the Housewives of Beverly Hills, because they're all in their little romantic little interludes and they're all budding romances and but it's just talking and they're just talking. Nothing really big's going on. And later, the second half after I woke up, I went back and watched it. But there's this woman named Cleopatra, and she is romantically involved with this guy named Hercules. And Hercules earlier was involved with this woman. What was her Violet?
I don't remember what her name was.
Right. Just the other blonde girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other blonde. Anyway, she recognized Hercules' negative tendencies and she bolted.
At the very beginning.
Yeah. But I guess there's a whole story. You two guys know a lot more about the backstory.
Well,
but let me just say that it was a longer movie when it was first made, and at the end, it's kind of the movie's told kind of like the Frankenstein book. There's a narrator who bookends both ends, and then he's telling us the story, which is the middle part. And so at the beginning, there's a big reveal that we're supposed to be really scared, and at the end it is really weird. But I guess at the beginning, when the movie was first made in 1932, it was a longer version, and it included some pretty horrific images of vengeance and somebody being transformed from a person, this would be Cleopatra, into a living monstrosity.
One of us.
Yeah.
One of
Well, Gene, the first thing I have to say, though, I am certain that no film critic or anyone else in our entire history has ever compared Freaks to the Housewives of Beverly Hills. So I appreciate
it just happened
that.
here. Because they're just talking about their little romances, and they're all involved in each other's. Yeah. So, but this movie is horror if you included, the original theatrical. But they cut it back, which I'm sure you guys maybe know why. I don't really know why they cut it back, but it certainly has its current status. It's interesting. There are a lot of deep themes here about otherness that are highly relevant to our society today, and there are other movies that follow along with this idea of otherness. There are people that are different than us, and so we need to treat them different, and of course that always means we treat them in a worse way. So there are other movies that are, I think, much more entertaining that follow along the similar theme. Back to this movie, recommendation, whatever. I don't know if this movie kind of defies recommendations.
Yes.
I think if you want to, if you like movies, then you should.
This
probably,
is a movie. Yeah,
you should see this movie. Yes, I'm not going to give it a thumb up, some thumb down. I'm not going to do it.
Oh, you're not.
No, I just think this movie kind of. It just makes a lot of points about humanity, and again, it's 1932, right? But it's really precedent for today's society, the society we currently live in, what we're going under currently, and yeah, so it's modern, it's relevant. Yeah.
It's amazing, Gene, because contemporary critics were also along your thought process, where I can't say see it and I can't say don't see it. So it's really interesting that you were getting that same vibe. But Scott, where are you at with Freaks?
I really enjoyed this movie, actually, when I was kind of driven to it from the other movie, The Mutations. I wanted to see it just for context because I'd, of course, heard of this movie. Everybody's heard of this movie. If you love movies at all, this always pops up. And I was pretty impressed because, yes, it does start off kind of slow, and it is very melodramatic. And if you're familiar with any American films from this time period, they're all melodramatic with kind of the stilted performances and everything.
Oh, okay. They're all that way.
But there's a lot going on in this movie, and for Tod Browning, who's the director, also directed Dracula, which is I think after that film was so successful, they kind of let him do whatever he wanted, and so he went completely off a cliff. And with this film, because it's so gutsy for the time, to actually bring in circus performers who were had these disabilities, and they were carnival people, and
they were real.
They were real, yeah.
Real
so of course people flipped out when they saw this original film because they'd never seen anything like this.
Right.
And however, interestingly, I don't feel that the performers were actually exploited, at least not the way they're depicted in the movie, because this could easily be really off-putting.
Yeah.
And it's not. And actually, you have a lot more sympathy for the circus the freaks versus the actual normal people who were reprehensible in this movie. The villains are just terrible. Cleopatra and Hercules are just the worst, most awful people, which makes them good villains because they're easy to hate. But there's a lot of interesting things in that movie. The Gooble Gobble, One of Us is a fantastic scene. It's an unforgettable scene, and that, of course, has come up in popular culture all the time. And there's, I guess we can go into the history of this movie, but I enjoyed it. So I'll say it's worth. I think it's worth seeing for film historical reasons, and just as an effective film of this time period. Because yes, if you're used to slasher films or current horror, this isn't scary.
Yeah.
But put it in context, and it's a film I think is easy to appreciate.
Yeah. If I comment, is that going along with what you said, is I think the able-bodied people were more of to use the word freaks, they were the more freaks than the people who had the disabilities, because the people with disabilities, they were acting more like regular human beings.
They were more of a family,
family,
each other,
a community. Yeah. They were protecting each other. They're watching out for each other, whereas the able-bodied persons those are the ones who were heavily imbued with like the greed, jealousy, using of physical violence to get your way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Scott, I do want to point out, though, that because you mentioned that Tod Browning was kind of going off the rails, taking a real big risk here. If you look at a lot of his filmography, because he was also in the circus as a younger person.
Oh, he was.
If you remember. Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
So Tod Browning, one of the reasons a lot of his films center around freaks or people who are shunned from society. One of the most famous ones of his is The Unknown with Lon Chaney. But he does a lot of his setting within a circus atmosphere because he lived in the circus atmosphere for many, many years. And he saw the mistreatment of people who were different than everyone else. And so I appreciate that you caught the fact that this was not being exploitative of people with disabilities. It was being more of accepting and understanding that, we have to integrate these people into our society and things. But also the beginning scene that Gene talked about of the bookend, that did not exist in the original part of the film.
Worthless, get rid of it.
Right. And so the original film actually started with the scene where the one guy is saying, oh, there's people trespassing on your property and you've got to go get them off of there.
It seems like a beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you had this introduction then to the freaks. And then you also, though, had this compassionate response from that landowner saying, oh, no, it's fine. You can stay.
Right. Because he changed his mind. The caregiver related, we're just walking out in the sunshine, which they were.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's really disappointing what happened to this movie. Irving Thalberg was the big MGM head and actually a big supporter of Tod Browning and was the person, of course, that greenlit Freaks to happen. Unfortunately, the feelings of the time were such that, oh my gosh, this is too much. And so, talking about studio interference that Gene and I do a lot, Thalberg took it upon himself to just savage this movie. And it was 92 minutes original running time, and now it is 64 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Right. And I've heard all that footage is just
and you can feel it too when you're watching the movie.
You absolutely can be. And there's even parts within the film itself that there's a little cut in the scene because they're just slicing some stuff out because it wasn't just Thalberg. Thalberg did the big 30 minutes of this movie is just gone, and I'm kind of just haphazardly doing it. But then local censor boards would go, oh, you can't say that line of dialogue. And so then they're having dialogue, and then there's a jarring little cut, kind of like you see on YouTube videos nowadays where people just, they're just editing. And
jump cut, yes.
Yeah. And it's just a real tragedy that this happened. There was a theater in New York that actually was advertising, hey, this movie's going to be horribly edited in like a week. Come see it in its original form.
Right. And didn't this movie at the beginning have a huge box office run at the very beginning?
Right. People were coming to see it.
Unedited version.
Yeah, they were coming to see it. Some of it could have been because, it's so disturbing, you have to go see. But the choppy narrative now is evident. The whole thing between the clown, Frozzo, and the blonde girl who leaves Hercules at the beginning was much more evolved, much more stuff going on with those characters, so you understood why there's such a, because they basically meet, fall in love, but there was a whole other backstory there. Plus the ending sequences,
oh man,
horribly edited.
Yeah.
And the ending of this film, well, first of all, there's about 9 different endings floating around right now of this film, and I don't know which ending you guys actually saw. But the original ending of this film, which is all gone, is a great atmospheric scene from Tod Browning where the freaks, it's storming, and
is it on this?
The freaks are coming through to get Hercules and to get Cleopatra. And this, where it's really brutal, is the scene where they've stabbed Hercules.
Right.
He's backing away as they're crawling after him, which is awesome.
So looks so
that
good.
Was in my version.
Yeah. But he gets up against that trailer, and then the movie you see today, the only version you can see today, then it cuts to what's happening with Cleopatra. In the original version, he gets up into his trailer, the freaks come in, and then do a horrible thing to him, which you don't know what that horrible thing is. They don't show that. But then the very last scene of the movie is him singing in a very high-pitched voice.
Right.
As part
castrated.
of the... Right.
Yeah.
And then the Cleopatra scene is, if you remember, she's up against a tree, and then it just cuts back to that circus bookend piece. Well, in the original version, lightning hits that tree, knocks it down on her, crushes her legs, and then the freaks descend upon her to do what they do.
Do a little surgery.
Right. And so then the real ending of this movie then is Harry Earls, the little guy, and his wife, who were brother and sister,
right.
Which is why they don't get to
Hans and Frida, was it?
Yeah. They don't get too intimate on the screen.
Yeah, because it explains they're little. You can tell that there's a little difference.
Yeah. But they are then going through the circus. It's like years later. They're coming through the circus and they see what Cleopatra is still part of the circus, and then they also see that Hercules is still part of the circus. And then the movie ends. How did your guys' movie end? Did you have the little part where Hans and Frida meet up,
Yes.
or did it just end with the Cleopatra scene?
There was Cleopatra. I saw it on Apple TV, a cheap rental. But then it went to Frida went with Proso, right? That guy, and then
so
Violet, then they went to
the little mansion,
the mansion.
Yes, that's what I saw.
And then the two able-bodied people left, and the two little people were
And
there, and they seemed to reconcile.
It looks tacked on too, because the
It
footage,
was.
the quality
Right,
looks awful.
The quality is
so
totally
it doesn't match
different,
up with whatever they restored.
So the most common endings for this is it ends right when Cleopatra is squawking, and then the movie ends, it goes to credits.
Right.
And then there's that scene that you guys just talked about, and then it goes to credits. And then there's a truncated version of that ending scene where it just shows Hans and Frida kind of hugging there at the end, and then it goes to credits.
You did a lot of homework for this one, right?
Well, I love this movie
Yes.
a lot, and one of the things that I really get into when a movie has been, in my opinion, mistreated. In this case, it was mistreated due to the time it was put out.
Studio meddling.
And the fact that you cannot see what the director originally intended. There is no director's cut DVD because the footage is gone. Because back then, we don't want this, and it's straight in the garbage. We're cutting the negative directly. That's the end of the story.
There's no film preservation at this point in history.
And it just really upsets me that these things happen, because I truly do view even the crappiest movie ever, The Mutations, let's say, I view this stuff as art, and I want that director's vision to be displayed on the screen. And if anyone else is ripping that away, this is not really Tod Browning's Freaks. This is Irving Thalberg's butchered version of what Tod Browning was filming.
Well, and you can, you know, and when studios do this, they can involve the director. Now he may have said, "I'm not doing that because I'm not touching my movie," but sometimes they just yank it away and do it anyway and don't consult with anybody. They just do whatever they want.
Wells.
Yeah, right. So that's I feel the same way. It's really unfortunate, especially in situations. Well, I know, like with Magnificent Ambersons, they destroyed the footage on purpose so that he could not put it back.
Yeah.
So, and in this case, I'm sure it could have been something similar, because even after the movie had its run, they would usually just toss them. I mean, they wouldn't. I don't know about this late in history, but I know in the early silent days, it would often throw films away. Essentially,
that's why 90% of silent films ever created are lost.
Oh my gosh!
Unfortunate.
But sometimes it works the other way, because in the modern movie Substance, which we all know about, there was a production company that wanted to buy this, but they told the director, who was a woman, that you got to get rid of that 20-minute ending sequence, and she just said, "No, I'm not doing it."
As she should.
And they backed away, and another production company ended up purchasing it, and that ending sequence remains, which is great. Which I love that thing. Yeah.
Well, what's the point of doing that if you're a filmmaker? Like you're saying, it's your vision. And if someone says, good movie, but if we could just cut all this stuff out, it would be so much better. What are you agreeing to? I mean, what's the point of that?
Right. Well, and I think, of course, here we're talking about the massive studio system where the directors didn't have as much control as certain directors maybe have today. Nobody is telling Christopher Nolan, "Oh, that scene's got to go." He's the only one making those decisions. But just a huge disappointment that occurred to this film. The bigger disappointment being the footage is lost for all time, and you can never experience what the film really was supposed to be. So it is kind of in that curiosity realm. I do like movies that take me into a world and take risks that I have not experienced before. There is not a film like Freaks out there. There's other movies that have attempted to do similar things, but this one is just really unique in the way it presents, because these are real freaks.
They're real,
right? Real. And no makeup going on here. And so it's a really interesting film. And of course, Harry Earls is in it, who I just love. He was in The Unholy Three with Lon Chaney. He also,
which character is he?
The little guy, the guy that Cleopatra was trying to kill.
Earls.
What did I say? Did I not say Earls?
You did.
Okay.
I just remember.
But he was also, if you remember, one of the lollipop kids in Wizard of Oz.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah, a working actor, apparently.
Yeah. No, he had quite a career, really, as far as playing roles like that. And have you seen The Unholy Three, where he's the...
No.
You need to watch that sometime. 1925. It's a silent movie, but it's pretty good.
That's also Tod Browning?
Yeah.
No, and he was pretty prolific. I looked him up. He has like 30 director credits. He's also an actor, he's a writer, very prolific.
And so you also saw that Angelo Rosito is in this movie? Master Blaster from Beyond Thunderdome? The little guy on top of the big guy?
Oh, really? Who was he in Freaks?
He was the one who had the mug that he wanted to give to Cleopatra during the wedding scene.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. The guy on the table.
Oh. Well, and let's talk about that wedding scene, because one of the beauties of Tod Browning is he didn't really make the transition that well to talking films, right? His master class was in silent film. If you look at a film like The Unholy Three or The Unknown, which is an absolute masterpiece, this is a director that really understood how to convey emotion and convey what's happening without having to have people say things. I love the fact that the wedding feast starts with a title card.
It says wedding feast.
Which is an exact callback to how a silent film would work. And if you turn the sound off during the wedding scene, it plays just like a silent film. So the dialogue during the wedding scene and the sound during the wedding scene is completely unnecessary because of the emotional reflections off of the people's faces. You can tell that Cleopatra is kind of demeaning.
Yeah, you can tell with Hercules, who is there.
Right. And you can see his thing change from happiness to, oh, I've been suckered by these people and being disrespected. Right. You can see the other characters pulling back. And so just for fun, you might try that and turn it down, because he really understood how to do silent films. And that's really where he just shined. And like Dracula, that was his most box office successful film, but it's really stilted in how the dialogue comes out and stuff because he didn't really quite get how to do that. And I think the ending sequence here where they're crawling through the mud and rain, that so plays perfectly as a silent thing. It does. And so he just I'm really disappointed that this basically ruined his career. He did a couple other movies after this, but he did not do anything of any real note after this.
Talking about one of your awkward cuts, there's an awkward cut in that scene because there's a cup that all the little people are drinking from, and then finally it comes to Cleopatra's turn to drink from the cup, because it's like the acknowledgement that she's one of us now, because she's marrying, the little guy. But then she has complete revulsion. But then there's an awkward cut there. And then all of a sudden we're seeing the contents of the drink being thrown onto a little person who's standing on the table. But there's a good 10 to 15 seconds probably cut there, which would have been quite revealing.
Do you know what was supposed to be there?
Oh, why don't you tell us?
I think Roger knows.
Frozzo and the blonde girl were actually in that scene. They were completely removed totally from that scene. So
because you don't see them.
There was a reaction shot of their revulsion at how Cleopatra was behaving right there, and then it does the splash, and then it actually cuts back to them, and they're kind of.
Why would you get rid of that? That seems.
Well, this is weird because this was a brutal edit hack job. It really was, and like I said earlier, there's scenes where here's people talking, and then there's a jump cut because they just decided to cut this piece out.
And that's a really egregious
that
one.
That piece out. And that's just what they did. And this movie ran afoul of not only Irving Thalberg just going crazy, but then, like I said, local censor boards just going, oh, no, we got to trim this by 3 seconds. And so you end up with a print that who knows what print is now the one that everyone is seeing. And there was, like I said, multiple different endings that got tacked onto this. Some additional prologue stuff that got tacked onto this, where they had a big dialogue crawl talking about how we have to be accepting of the little people and all this stuff, and just a real tragedy that we kind of sucked back in the 30s.
The movie is also interesting. Well, as like from a filmmaker's, I always like to look for visuals and things like that in movie. And like we talked about, the everybody's crawling underneath in the rain. And it's like this chase scene in the rain with the wagons, and they cut to the inside of the wagons, and it's all. Yeah. I actually thought of Inception while they were doing that because it was like this topsy-turvy kind of set. And it's all raining. I mean, this is like, all practical effects, rain, and it's just awesome, that kind of stuff. And it's too bad that that is all truncated, because it was clearly building up to something amazing. And it just ends, that ends. And that whole bookend stuff, I hate that so much. Yeah. It's always a sign that the movie's been messed with. Just like Cabin of Dr. Caligari, which I think the bookend may have been in at the script level or something, but it's just so unnecessary. Just let the story tell itself. You don't need to be telling the audience how to feel. The film does a very effective job of doing that.
Well, and I think with Dr. Caligari, though, I think we're kind of in that silent film realm where you had to do some setup sometimes, because that's a pretty common thing in a lot of silent movies where you've got, here, I'm going to give you a big title explaining where we're at, and
because audiences are dumb.
Well, yeah, but I think also silent films, until they got more modernized in how they presented things, it was kind of hard sometimes to just get dropped into a story without some little piece
introduction or something.
Of an introduction there. But I do think if you like Freaks or like movies like that about an outsider who's being mistreated and trying to fit into the world, The Unknown is another brilliant film. I mentioned that to Gene maybe around episode 12 or something. That we should do that at some point. Because it's very similar in this, and the fact that Tod Browning understands circuses and circus performers. Joan Crawford's in The Unknown.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's 1927. But
we should have a period where we just do movies that are made before The Wizard of Oz.
There's a lot of good ones.
Yeah. I've often wanted to look back more at more silent films, because so many of them are unappreciated, or most people have heard of. And most people have heard of Charlie Chaplin, but that's about it. Buster Keaton maybe, but there are a lot of great silent movies out there.
Well, do you know who my most beloved silent film?
No, not again.
Like actor?
America's Sweetheart.
Who's that?
America's Sweetheart. Mary
Lord.
Pickford. Have you seen a Mary Pickford movie before?
Probably, but I can't. I mean, I know she was part of United Artists.
Not part. She's
she
one
started
of the founders.
it. Yeah. Well, it was her, Chaplin, and
Fairbanks.
Okay, and somebody else.
D.W. Griffith.
Okay.
Wow, started UA.
The Academy Awards, which just happened a few weeks back. Do you know why that exists?
Mary Pickford.
Yes.
Okay, now we know.
Hollywood retirement home. Do you know why that exists?
That's Mary Pickford.
Yes. Yes. Right. She was
an activist,
big deal. In a time when women were not treated well.
Of course.
She had the world at her fingertips.
Nice. Well, going back real fast, you mentioned other movies. I'm going to kind of change topic a little bit. But there is a movie that I really love that kind of goes along this. It's 2014. It's an A24, Ex Machina, with Oscar Isaac. Definitely deals. It's very modern. It's very sleek. And it's all the trappings you want to go for in a movie, and it follows, I think, this movie kind of closely. It's just people who are treated others. They're segregated. They're separated. They're treated differently. And at the end, they get their comeuppance for sure. So I would definitely recommend that movie.
Right, and you've got like a District 9, which has similar kind of
District 9
and stuff like that, But this is the first movie to take you into that kind of world, really. And just as, like Gene said, it's only 60-something minutes long. It takes a long time for stuff to really, really happen, but well worth your time.
Yeah.
It's also on archive.org. It's in the public domain. So if you don't want to spend the rental fee, check it out anyway. Go there. It's available.
Well, good. Yeah. That's just $4.
Yes, it's worth seeing. I also like to say that I'm almost 100% positive this movie is one of the movies that inspired the Hays Code, because this is a pre-code movie.
Right.
Which, if you've ever heard that term before, maybe a lot of people don't know about it. It's basically the R-rated movies were made.
Yeah, we talked about the Hays Code long.
Did you? Okay. Yeah, because I'm always fascinated by those films, because you see those in the 30s, typically late 20s, 30s, and you're like, wow, this is pretty racy. You think all these old movies are all wholesome tales about all these wonderful things, and no, they had adults making films, and this is a good example of one where it was pushing the envelope. And as you kind of mentioned earlier, people saw the test screening for this and were running out of the theater, according to Wikipedia anyway, which inspired Thalberg to go in there and start messing with it. But they'd never seen. Well, and another thing, this is also on Wikipedia, so I can't verify it as fact, but it's totally believable that while they were making this movie, the circus performers were sequestered because they were disturbing to the people on the studio lot, except for the normal actors. So they were, I guess, put them in a tent or something, so they wouldn't interact with anybody.
That is a true story, and because there's numerous interviews later on after this movie, like in the 50s and 60s, where they were tracking down the still living actors, and they were verifying things like that. And so a lot of their experience on this movie was negative because of things like that.
Right. Which is so ironic because the way the film portrays them is much more sympathetic than reality.
Than real life.
Well, and I think we're also talking about things like, we could even talk about Gone with the Wind with Hattie McDaniel that, you're going to win the Academy Award maybe, but you can't be in the audience. You're way up there. And stuff.
Amazing.
So,
Ain't America great?
Yeah, we're awesome. But... that's just, again, a relic of the time and a relic, well, maybe it's coming back on how we treated people. But
right.
I do like, the Hays Code. That's a good discussion to have. I think at one point, Gene and I were going to do a whole episode just ripping the MPA and Hays Codes and all that kind of stuff because...
Yeah, we should do that.
It's this entity that basically is telling me what I can and cannot see. Yeah. And to me, that's intruding upon the artistic vision of a director, screenwriter, etc. Make your movie. Here's my movie. End of story. If you want to see it, go see it. If you are offended by blah, 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 don't go see it. We're all good, right?
Yeah. Right.
But watching pre-code, pre-Hays Code movies is interesting because you don't really recognize that, some pretty nasty violence or sexual innuendo and storylines were going on prior to the Hays Code.
In this movie, did they show, because Cleopatra has her tongue removed as well, did they show that? Or
all the violence itself was kind of just implied.
Yeah, so still 1932.
You weren't seeing it, but it's, they just cut the stuff where it got more aggressive. Like all the freaks are on top of Hercules. All the freaks are descending and covering, screaming Cleopatra.
Okay.
Right? And then you see later what they actually did to them.
Right.
And so just, again, a real tragedy that no one on the planet living today has seen the original version of this movie.
Right, and it won't happen.
And it will never happen.
No.
Yeah. But the other thing I'll point out about the Hays Code, though, is you couldn't even show, the reason Lucy and Desi had separate beds even though they were married is things like the Hays Code, right?
Yeah.
The fact that All in the Family was groundbreaking for allowing the audio of a flushing toilet, which had never occurred before because of the Hays Code. Just shows you how completely insane we as humans can be sometimes.
I think Psycho was the first movie to show a toilet. Since the Hays Code was implemented, but it's
just
ridiculous.
Unbelievable. And then we get into the MPAA, which is now the MPA, where the thing I have a problem with them is they were cutting movies. This is going to be an X-rated movie unless you cut X, Y, or Z, so it gets cut. But then the DVD comes out, unrated director's cut. So what the hell are we doing? I can see it on DVD, but I can't see it at the theater. I don't get it, right?
Yeah.
Politics.
And didn't it go the other way? Because it wasn't, tell me if I'm wrong, but wasn't like Jaws was going to be rated G? But then Spielberg had to add that scene where there was a descending severed leg in the movie to give it a PG rating so it would be more profitable.
But I think this is a different discussion, though, because you can see how PG was treated back in the late 60s and in through a lot of the 70s, because there's a movie called Blood and Lace, which has some of the most brutal hammer murders you'll ever see. The dang thing is rated PG. And Tourist Trap was also rated PG. They've since been re-rated R now under the new system, but PG was looked at differently. It was like, okay, your movie is completely wholesome for the whole family. It's a G. Okay, everything else is pretty much going to be PG unless you're showing nudity, and then it's going to be R.
Well, even in the 70s, I remember as a kid seeing Force 10 from Navarone because Harrison Ford was in it. So I'm like, oh, it's a sequel to Guns from Navarone. And there's a shot with Barbara Bach in a bathtub. So you're just, oh, she's taking a bath. She stands up and she's completely naked.
Right.
It's
that has nothing to do with anything. So they're just changing the rating.
Yeah.
Well, but it's PG in the 70s, so you could count almost on nudity in the 70s as a PG movie.
Well, and Sheena with Tanya Roberts, which I don't know if anyone has seen that movie, but that was PG-13 with full frontal nudity.
Oh, really?
Tanya Roberts. Yeah. So just really it's weird how we
the rating
decide
system
to rate things.
Yeah.
So anyway, we are kind of off topic, but not really, because Freaks ran afoul of not necessarily ratings, just contemporary mindsets and stuff, and is completely butchered, but still well worth a watch for sure. If you've never seen it, and you call yourself a horror film aficionado, I would be surprised, because you do need to see this one. Gene, any final thoughts on Freaks?
Maybe you don't watch it late at night. Be aware the first half can wear on you, but it kind of gets there, especially the scene with the wedding banquet. This really starts happening then.
Scott, anything more?
Good movie. I was just going to add that Tod Browning as a director, I think I'm always impressed by these filmmakers from way back, even Silent Days. Well, Silent Days, it wasn't as bad because, the point I'm getting to is that cameras were huge, right? And to move a camera around, especially in the early sound era, was a real pain because it made noise, so they had to, blimp it or cover it. And just moving it was a big task because it was the sound stuff and everything. It was just a bigger machine versus the silent era. So Tod Browning moves his camera around. You can tell there's a lot of dolly shots in this movie. And I just appreciate that he's just takes that kind of care with his films too. He's an artist, and it's plain to see stuff like this. It's just a good example of that. So I think I haven't seen all of his movies. I like to see the Unholy Three. Is that what you said?
Unholy Three, but I would also recommend, and actually higher recommendation is The Unknown.
Okay, because everybody knows about Dracula, but there's this.
But we haven't reviewed it yet.
Oh, yeah, reviewing it. Okay. Well, this movie we're reviewing is worth seeing for a lot of reasons, but I appreciate when a director extends his abilities onto the screen where you can just see something happening. You can tell that there's someone behind. It's not just a bunch of static shots, is what I'm saying. So.
Right, and the set design is really good in this too. There's lots of stuff going on in the background.
Yes.
All of that. So it's lots of stuff happening. Of course, highly recommended for me. But Gene and I will be back next week. We realize that for reasons we don't understand, Samara Weaving's new movie Borderline was a day and date release on streaming. So we absolutely have to see that because we really like Samara Weaving.
We're Samara Weaving fans for sure. But we just talked about this guy Tod Browning. Maybe next week we could postpone Samara Weaving and then do Freaks. Or not Freaks, but the Dracula.
So Samara Weaving does not put up with being postponed. So we need to do Borderline next week for sure.
She's been texting you?
She's like, you guys, don't be postponing me. So we'll do that, and then we can maybe catch back up. I don't know, Dracula, we could maybe catch up. Because we did Nosferatu and talked about the Werner Herzog version as well as the original version of that as well. But anyway, we'll be back next week. I don't think Scott's going to join us for the Samara Weaving movie.
It's on streaming, though, you said.
It's Borderline is what it's called. Yeah. Jack Nicholson's son is in it. So we'll be back next week with Borderline. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.